Welcome to Bucket. I'm Matt Moore. Oh, wait, no, that's not right. I'm your host, Jim Turvey, for the day. Joining me today is Joe Delaire. No, wait, that's not right either. We have Michael Fiddle. This is a very different Sunday night show. Matt Moore is busy finishing off a really tasty CLV sandwich on his RJ Barrett Most Improved Player of the Year ticket that he talked about last year. He's now the favorite. That's not cashing, I'll tell you that. But for right now, it's a great ticket to have. But with me today, more importantly, is Michael Fiddle. We are in the Tommy John studio. We are here for Bucket Sunday night. It's a little bit of a different thing. You're not as much a futures guy, so we're going to talk NBA Cup. We're going to do some best bets, but we're going to kind of talk about it in a Fiddle approach. I'll give some futures. We'll talk through kind of the background to the NBA Cup. It's its second year. There's some interesting betting ways to approach this, but before I start rambling off about the Cup, how are you doing, Fiddle? How was your betting weekend?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been a pretty flat NFL Sunday for me, but some tough beats on the board on good positions. So I'm a little bit frustrated right now with the way the weekend betting has gone, but funny, definitely a funny intro. I actually thought you messed up that intro and started laughing. I didn't know you pre-planned the I am Matt Moore. I just thought you were reading from the sheet and I was like, wow, he screwed up his name already. That's hilarious.
No, slightly planned, but yeah, it did read that way. Hopefully, I saw you tweet out you had a tough beat in basketball today too. The Rockets got you, or the Pistons got you? I was out of pocket today a little bit for NBA, so I was kind of following people via Twitter. You had a tough beat today.
Yeah, well, Rockets and Pistons, I think two teams that we should probably talk about as it gets to
Mm-hmm.
best bets, as it gets to NBA Cup stuff. I was on the Rockets -3.5. They were up 12 with like 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. They were up 5 with a minute left. Alperen Şengün bobbles the rebound that would have caused the cover. Then they allow a three-pointer, and then they miss a free throw for the cover also and end up only winning by 2. So it was actually a brutal sequence of events. Totally like marked it as a win and then walked away and came back to realize, oh no, this is a brutal sweat, and got the wrong end of it. So maybe I jinxed myself.
There's nothing worse than marking it as a bet, as a win, and then coming back and having to change it. But on the flip side, I'll definitely live mark stuff as a loss to try and reverse jinx it back into life. And that there's no better feeling than reverse jinxing it back to life. So, all right, let's move on to the NBA Cup here, the Emirates NBA Cup. This is the second year of the NBA Cup. I think the first year most people would say was a success. I think a lot of people going in thought it was pretty goofy, pretty silly. Kind of this, idea that's, maybe being brought, kind of grafted on as a, Premier League idea coming to the NBA. Is anyone going to actually care? Well, they got LeBron to win the first year. You couldn't have really got anything to get more eyeballs on it. I think for the second year, this will be a test. It had the novelty in year one. It had LeBron in, winning it in year one. This is going to be the one where it's like, all right, do people actually care about this? Did LeBron make it so that this is like a thing that some of these veterans can put on their resume? Or is it just kind of a goofy thing? What was your year one experience with the NBA Cup, Fiddle?
I really enjoyed the level of competition, and I thought some of the courts were absolutely atrocious. Like, I loved watching it, but if I have to stare at a red court or an orange court for 3 hours, then my level of interest and my eyeballs start to hurt. So I hope this year they go more of those slate gray courts. I'm all for doing a cool court. The level of competition has been fantastic. So someone actually reached out to me earlier today and said, do you think we have to wait 20 games to actually know what's going on in the league? Because Jeff Van Gundy used to always say it takes 20 games to actually understand what these teams really are. And my response was, no, it's going to happen sooner because the level of competition in the NBA Cup. And we're going to see some of these teams kind of trying to bring their A game, playing wire to wire, as we'll get into some of the rules and why that's important. But I think we're going to start to learn who these teams really are a little bit earlier than we normally do because the success of the NBA Cup.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I do have to shout out, we had, the Lakers did win it all, but we collectively, action was all over the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton last year. And we came so close to that Halliburton ticket, I think was in like triple digits before the year. So hopefully we can talk through some fun bets for the Cup today. And I'm sure, if you're following any of us in the app, we'll be loading up as the days go along to here. Action. So you talked about the courts, and that kind of leads into, I want to talk like big picture macro view of this NBA Cup for a second here, because there was something I remember last year that people were saying they thought there were a bunch of unders right at the very start, and people were asking if like the shooting eye, if like maybe these courts were distracting, what was going on, was it a playoff atmosphere? Where did you end up market wise? I know that's like you're so in these weeds of everyday kind of tracking movement and like big picture macro type stuff. What do you think we can expect from some of these macro trends as we go into year two? Is it going to be the same as year one? Are there things you're looking for year two? Is there stuff that even impacts outside of the NBA Cup, like the rest of the schedule? What are some of your thoughts for betting the NBA for the next month or so? Actually, let me pause before I get the answer. I will just set the scene a little bit in that we have the NBA Cup starting on Tuesday. I should have done this right from the start. My apologies. And then the championship's on December 17th. So for the next month, the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks or so, we are going to have these games are on Tuesdays and Fridays. It ends, the quarterfinals start December 10th. Then we have that whole week is kind of set aside in Vegas. They play the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals in Vegas. That was also, kind of a thing LeBron has long been tied to. Is he going to own a team in Vegas? He had to like show up for his Vegas crew there. So, but to zoom back out, so this next 5 or 6 weeks, what are you looking at betting wise with the Cup specifically, but also with games outside of the Cup going on during the same time when teams are going to care about the Cup?
So, Jim, I'm going to go game by game and then bigger picture. We know it starts on Tuesday. We know they're going to be Tuesdays and Fridays. And we know that the matchups are pretty much set in advance. And generally, there are spots that are primetime viewing games where the NBA mandates you need to be playing your star player. So if there's a back-to-back set, I don't think there's any back-to-back sets relative to NBA Cup games. But so those spots are going to be lessened. Expect the stars to be out there as long as they're not injured. Of course, we have a bevy of star injuries to deal with right now. Chet Holmgren, unfortunately, tonight lands hard on his hip and is helped to the locker room pretty immediately and ruled out for the rest of the game. So we have to wait and kind of see what that means for OKC in this tournament and moving forward for the next month or two. But when you have these games and the stars are going to play, the books will price them a week or so ahead of time, and they'll lay lines for Tuesdays and Fridays 2 weeks out. And so we can use those lines and we could use those games not to bet them 2 weeks in advance. Because one thing I would recommend not doing is betting a single NBA game 2 weeks in advance, hoping to get CLV. The CLV is, even if you do get it, it's probably still not worth it to tie up your money for 2 weeks in that environment. Like, the reason why I'm not the biggest futures person is because I love being able to churn my bankroll. So don't bet 2 weeks in advance, but start using those lines to help you understand the prices of the current game. So for example, we had the Hawks and the Celtics about a week ago I think it was November 4th. And then the Cup was starting November 12th, in which the Hawks were at the Celtics for that first game. And the prices between those two, you could just compare them and say, well, what's off and what's the bettable angle? And so you see that the NBA Cup game has a total of 231.5. And yet, because the Hawks have steamed towards the over and cashed so many overs this season, the individual game was 234.5, and there was no Jaylen Brown in that spot. So you're like, what in the world is that total doing so high? And it was an immediate, let me use the NBA Cup game happening 8 days from now to know how this game should actually be priced and fade the outlier, which is the 234.5 in a game market, which ended up winning. So what I like to do is use and be aware of what's available on the board and compare it to other prices, because some of these will be repeat matchups. That's like the biggest thing to be aware of.
I love that. Yeah, it's really smart to use this. Like you said, they've been out for a while. I agree with you. I am the biggest futures person. I love tying up my bankroll with futures, but I don't want to bet 2 weeks in advance for a single game. But they have had these lines out there, and it's really smart to leverage those lines in ways that benefit you as a bettor. The first night, we've got a couple of big matchups. There's going to be Knicks-Sixers, which is going to be Joel Embiid's season debut against the team that knocked him out last year, and there was bad blood galore by the end of that. So I think that's going to be a really interesting game. We're also going to have Warriors-Mavericks. Warriors, the Thunder did lose Chet Holmgren tonight, but the Warriors absolutely took care of business in OKC. They look like they are going to be around for a while as long as Steph is healthy, and they won even with Steph off the court. So those should be a couple of good games that first night. if we want to walk through any of the groups that jump out to you, I think Group C is going to be the one that catches most people's eye. That's the one. So the way they did this, and actually I'll throw it to you because I know you have a good rant for this. The way they did this is it is determined by conference. However, it's not just divisions. It's seeded by overall record. So using last year's record, they tried to kind of spread around the wealth. However, teams change from year to year and teams have down years. So you ended up with a Group C that has the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Pelicans, the Warriors, and the Grizzlies. And now the Pelicans and Grizzlies are pretty dinged up right now, so they are not the level that they could be at. But if by the end of this, all 5 of those teams are healthy, that could be an absolutely insane final game for Group C. I want to throw it to you though, and when we were chatting before the show, you had this rant here about maybe it should be divisions, and at first I was like, but by the end I was like, you know what, I think you might be onto something. So what is your opinion on how they should have set up the cup games here?
Jim, seeing the Mavericks, Warriors, Nuggets, Grizzlies, Pelicans, albeit potentially the West Group C of death, it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in terms of a league decision. These should be replicas of the NBA divisions, which are 3 in each conference and 5 teams per. It is exactly the same format to split them up in groups of 5 within each conference. So why are we not just using the divisions? Because if we think about divisions in the NBA, they're completely meaningless. There's no advantageous playoff spot for winning your division like there is in the NFL, where you automatically get a home court or a home field for your first game. There is no scheduling situation where you play your division more, as long as you play your conference 4 times in each. So there's really no juice to the Nets, Hawks, Hornets, Celtics, and Knicks being in the same Atlantic division in the East. Why not use the NBA Cup and these highly competitive environments to say, okay, we are just going to replicate the divisions and drum up some rivalries if it's the same matchups year over year over year. And sure, the talent might ebb and flow a little bit, and some divisions might be harder or easier, but is that really the end all be all for the 1 game playoff or 2 game playoff single elimination NBA mid-season tournament? If we want to drum up the most interest, it should absolutely be division based. And I just think it's a huge missed opportunity. And Jim, you took the words out of my mouth saying teams change. If anyone uses strength of schedule rankings based on last year's data, throw that shit out and go readjust based on projected win totals for this year. You can literally know the strength of these teams. If the NBA came out and said, we're totally leaning into the gambling thing here, we listened to Bucket's podcast. I know Silver listens to this once forward, once backwards, and then again forward on half speed so he doesn't miss a word. Well, we would tell him, if you want to lean into the gambling stuff and you want to perfectly make the divisions or the groups competitive, then do it based on projected win totals for this year, and do it based on the roster changes and a market that develops. But obviously it becomes harder with scheduling and knowing those things in advance. So the reality is it should just be divisions before we start talking about individual group stuff. It should absolutely just be division based.
Well, and 100%, like I said, the highlight of the first night is Knicks Sixers, in part because that is a really good regional rivalry. Now, again, it was lackluster until last year because it just doesn't really matter, because they play each other one more time. It doesn't really matter, and you're 100% right. This would be a really good way to bump those rivalries up. The other interesting group that I think is it's got some good teams, but also has a couple of injuries here. We've got the Thunder, the Jazz, the Suns, the Spurs, and the Lakers. Thunder just lost Chet. Jazz are shutting things down. The Suns are going to be without KD potentially for a bit of it. The Spurs look like they are a year away. I think we at Action, and by we, I'll say me and Brandon, were maybe a year early on the Spurs. And then the Lakers, who, they have already, it feels like they've played a whole season with the ups and downs they've already had. They are the reigning champs here, and they might have, the 2 theoretically best players in this group. I think the Lakers are pretty interesting. Right now, you can get Anthony Davis MVP at plus 4,200 for the tournament as a whole. He is clearly the best player on this Lakers team right now. They are leaning into it. LeBron has shorter MVP odds. I think that should be the other way around. I think AD at plus 4,200 with a group that's really dinged up that they're in. They have shown that they have had success in this tournament. The Lakers are a team that I didn't even really have on my list to start this. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, these injuries here in this group, the fact that they can just run back, the success they had last year in this, and then the AD of it all, where he is playing out of his mind right now. I think AD at plus 4,200 to win tournament MVP is going to be my single player best bet for the NBA Cup preview here that we've got going.
Yeah, I'm actually going to bet it myself right now as you're describing it, because not only was it the one that I was looking at a few days ago when we knew we were going to talk about this, and I was deep diving into NBA Cup stuff as it was coming, given tonight's Chet news, and when you look at that division, Thunder, Lakers, Suns, now without Kevin Durant for 2+ weeks, Spurs and Jazz, who struggled to win any games and just played each other, and the Jazz won by 1. Lakers are the clear choice, and you can't bet this group now because the whole market's off the board with the Chet news. So check to see tomorrow what this reopens at, but I would assume it's going to reopen at a reduced Lakers price, and the way to directly play into this angle is Anthony Davis MVP. Like, LeBron already won MVP in the spot. AD is clearly taking the reins. Redick is drawing up and scheming up a whole system around AD's talents. So yeah, I don't bet futures, Jim. I'm going to bet this one with you.
I love it. Let's go through a couple more teams, and then we can zoom out at the end to do a few more things I think are important to look through. I think we have some overlap here. I'm gonna rattle off 4 teams. I'm gonna do real quick. We've already gone pretty deep on this. I'm gonna say the Pacers, the Pistons, the Hornets, and the Rockets. I'm gonna make like a 1-sentence case for each of these teams. So the Pacers, right now, they're listed behind the Bucks as group favorites, despite clearly being the better team this season so far. The Bucks are really going through it. They've also really kind of had the Bucks number of late. The Bucks do get to play host to them in we have everyone plays everyone else in the group once, and so there is some like home and away stuff that you can look at that I think is key. But between that and the fact that the points scored, so there's tiebreakers. The first is head to head. The second is point differential, which we'll talk about in a second. The third is just total points scored. It would really be hard to come down to that, but it's like a mini edge that the Pacers are definitely going to have over anyone else because of their offense. So at plus 230 to get out of the group, I'm still low on the Heat. There's some Jimmy Butler, is he hurt type stuff going on as well. So I think the Pacers to get out of this group at plus 230 is a nice short number. Do you have any Pacers thoughts?
I think the Pacers are pretty soft this year. Like, I think they lack a lot of toughness. And the way that the officiating has gone this season, it requires a little bit of toughness. However, they completely have the Bucks number. The Heat are potentially going to be without Jimmy Butler, which is exactly what I want to talk about next. The Toronto Raptors are cover darlings without ever winning. They're 2-8 straight up, 8-2 ATS. So
amazing.
Look at that dichotomy. The Pistons at plus 1,300 is the one I really want to talk about because they play Miami, Jim, in the first NBA Cup game on Tuesday. It's like one of the first ones to tip off. And so the odds board isn't going to shake that much until at least after that game plays. And if we know what's going to happen with Jimmy Butler, that game's in Detroit. Miami's a 3.5 or 4-point favorite, and Miami obviously clearly ahead in the NBA Cup Group B winner. So if the Pistons end up getting a home game without Jimmy Butler there, then that's a situation where I want to immediately pick up not only them in that particular game, but also plus 1,300 in their group, because just winning one of those, right, and getting a 20% edge right off the bat in how limited this sample size of games are. I think you play like 6 games for your NBA Cup ticket, maybe 8. So
four games.
4. Yeah, you play the other teams in your conference, and then I think you play one outside of your outside of your group as well. So the Pistons are the team to pick off in terms of a schedule spot that might be very advantageous in also tracking related injuries.
Well, 100%. And so they were the second team I had on this list. And it's funny, you said you think the Pacers, I kind of agree with you. I actually don't love this Pacers team. It's more that I think that they should be the favorite, but I want the Pacers and the Pistons in this group because I do have questions about the Heat. The Bucks have looked very sus. The Pistons get to host. You said they get to host the Heat. They also get to host the Bucks. So they get that plus 1,300. They're behind Toronto in terms of odds. That's insane. Toronto is not in it to win it this year. Cade, on the other hand, Mr. Triple Double suddenly, if he starts like figuring out how to stop turning the ball over a little bit, he's going to reach a whole nother level. I really like what I've seen from the Pistons. They net rating wise, even adjusted net rating, they aren't really popping, but I do think that this team is better than the market is saying. Especially like having them below Toronto is just kind of crazy to me. So plus 1300, I think you can make both of those, the Pacers and the Pistons. And then in that group, you kind of have the mid-range shot and you have a long shot. So I really like the Pistons as well. Do you want to hop in real quick?
Yeah, I just want to say to that, because of the schedule where the Pacers do not play on that first Tuesday NBA Cup night, I would highly suggest, if you're interested in one or both, like anytime, just blanket rule for betting into futures markets, try not to bet two things at the same time in the same relative bracket, because you're essentially immediately hedging against yourself. Whereas you would like to do that after you've gained a little bit of value, and then you come back the other direction on your second take. So take the Pistons first because they're plus 1300, they're longer odds, and their game is first, and then wait on the Indiana side to play back after a few nights and how it shakes out.
Now, the only thing I'll say about that, do the Pacers play that? Usually the Pacers don't. Do the Bucks play that first night against the
Yes, they play against the Toronto Raptors, but given the way the Bucks are going to be massive heavy favorites, like I would assume a Bucks win minimally shakes the odds.
Definitely Bucks win. My only thought is, if the Pistons win, are they going to shift the Heat's odds more than the inverse, like the Pistons number gets shorter? So, but I think you're right that the split nature of these schedule means you should definitely think about it. You should 100% be weighing when to place these and being smart and leveraging pieces. The next team I'll move us along to is the Hornets. So they're at plus 1100 to win their group. This is a team, just seems like this is a little bit less like numbersy, and like LaMelo Ball in the NBA Cup seems like it's going to be a fucking blast. Like they already have the goofy court. They already have all the fun. Like they're kind of like the Pacers light, and the Pacers did really well in this last year. They have the ability to run up the score. They don't play a whole lot of defense, but they're in a group that has the Knicks, Philly, and Orlando. The Knicks are a team that I have been lower than the market on all year. In the futures, I was low on them. Game to game, I've been low on them. They've looked good, but not amazing. Philly has been dinged up beyond all belief. Now they do have Paul George and Joel Embiid back, but that's going to take a second to adjust. Orlando still does not have Paolo. To me, this plus 1100, this is kind of a group that could be gettable. Again, we have to remember how few games of a sample that these are NBA regular season games. Even if they are the Cup, they're still NBA regular season games. A very small sample of them. To get really long numbers, I still do think is the way to approach this Cup. So the Hornets, that's kind of a fun one for me, but I do think that group is vulnerable. Are you joining on the Hornets train, or is it a little bit too hard to imagine them coming out of that group with someone like New York and Philly at the top?
Philly is a disaster right now, so I would think it's New York or nothing. I understand the Hornets angle. They play a lot of game theory optimal basketball under Charles Lee, just launching threes. They're third in the league in 3-point attempt frequency, shooting like north of 47% of their shot attempts are 3-pointers. Yep. So if you are going to take a long shot ticket and you are going to pick out an underdog, then picking off the variance king in the 3-point shooting Hornets would be the direction to go. But I actually think the Knicks are going to start to emerge as being a little bit stronger. I hope they start to play faster, because a lot of their offensive numbers are pretty strong, but they're just dead last in the league in pace. So I think they need to pick that up.
By adjusted net rating, they are really in that top tier of teams. So I think that's very fair. And you could even approach it in the way, we did with the Pacers and Pistons. You could do Knicks and Hornets, and I have not looked into the way it should be bet, but that's another one. Maybe you can time things and do that market well as well. The last team is honestly my least favorite of the four. It's a shorter number. It's more a team that I just am finding myself very intrigued by. I think that they could do really well in a League Cup setting like this. Houston Rockets. They're in a group with the other two big names are Minnesota and Sacramento. Now, Minnesota has been playing well. However, they also are getting floated by some really good 3-point shooting, especially a lot of it coming from Anthony Edwards. I mean, the jump he has made, either he's going to be, now in the top tier of players, or there's a little bit of unsustainable nature there. The shooting numbers they are putting up are really crazy. He looks great, But I do this Houston defense is a really strong unit. I think they might give Minnesota a little trouble. Sacramento is a team that I actually kind of like in a tournament like this. They play fast and open and free, and I think that translates pretty well to League Cup. But to me, I just thought, I looked and I said the Rockets at plus 340 to me is a little bit long again in these really condensed schedules here to win that group. I also like the potential to qualify for them. I think they could definitely be the second best team in that group. Remember, we get one qualifier beyond the group winners in each conference too. So the Rockets are a team that just kind of in general I'm looking at and am intrigued by. Is there any intrigue for you, Fiddle, there, or Minnesota is a team that you're keeping an eye on?
I'm very interested in the Rockets. They are better than their early record shows, and I think they're 6-3. They're top 5 in plus minus per 100 possessions. So negate pace, they're kind of a slower pace team, and just judge them relative to their competition in a points plus minus per 100 possessions. And this team can hang with anybody. And so we're getting sharp action come in on the Rockets anytime they're an underdog because they're well coached. They're really tough. They're a young group who might want to go for this. They do have enough veterans. So, yeah, I'm actually very intrigued. Probably in a game-to-game angle on a Rocket side.
That's funny. My last note, and I hadn't seen it until I threw it back over to you, but was to approach this on a game by game angle. I do like that. You mentioned, the plus minus adjusted net rating. They're basically even with the Wolves. They're like a tiny bit below them, but they're higher than the Kings for sure. And I do think that this Rockets team is better than the Kings. So if you're getting what is the second,
I think the Kings are worse than their record shows.
I agree 100%. All right, we will move along in a second to best bets. I promise. I do want to zoom out and just talk about a few things that popped. We've talked about this in bits and pieces, but I do think this point differential thing is really important. And we saw it. One of the best bets that we gave out on buckets last year on the future days was the Celtics to win their group. Even though they went into that final game, it looked like crazy things were going to happen. I believe they're 14-1 to win their group before that final game. But if you looked at it, they just had to blow out a bad team by like 30 points, and they did it. And so I think that, I think the books will sniff out this to a certain degree. Where I think you can find little edges around the margins is like fourth quarter spreads, player props. Like player props in the NBA, oftentimes I'm in the weeds now doing these minutes projections and usage projections. I notice how often minutes are down because of blowouts. It really, the modern NBA with all the threes, it really is that, players are playing. The star players often sit big chunks of the fourth quarter. I don't think that's going to happen in these games. I do think that player prop overs, if you like player prop overs, these are some interesting ones. Now we'll have to see if the books do sniff it out, but I do think there's little ways to find the fact that this point differential is going to be really, really important, whether it's live betting, whether it's alt lines. I think alt lines are always interesting with these, or player props. I do think that there will be little edges to be found still in these games. I see you nodding. You're definitely in on the alt lines. Is there anything else that's like a macro view betting for the League Cup for you?
When you take an alt line on a home favorite, don't do it on. I wouldn't really recommend doing it on a road favorite. But if you like a home underdog or a home favorite, in an NBA Cup game, I strongly recommend using escalators in this situation or evaluating the escalator market to see if there's, juice that's worth the squeeze to really get an awesome payout on a bet if you get the right angle, because the point differential is so key. We saw the Celtics last season fouling Andre Drummond when they were up 25 points because they wanted to hack him and his terrible free throws and generate extra possessions so that they could win by 30. So Jim, I just pulled up my key numbers chart for the NBA. This is nice stuff I talk about frequently. 12, the number 12 is more common than the number 10 in NBA outcomes. So if you're looking for alt spreads, play it to 11.5.
I love that. Yeah. So there's definitely stuff out there. We will do our best. I'm sure we'll be chatting about it on buckets as well on the day-to-day basis. Those Monday episode or the Tuesday episodes, Tuesday morning episodes, we'll be covering a lot of it. You and me, Fiddle, let's move on to Monday's slate. Now, it's not the best slate. You and I were kind of grousing about how, there's not that...
Good thing we did 25 minutes on NBA Cup.
Yeah, that's why we lingered a little bit longer on the Cup, because Monday's slate isn't all that great. There's not even lines for one or two games. There's no player props. So I'm going to kind of give leans here. I do have one side that I like, but what is your best bet for Monday's slate?
I'm going to go with one best bet, and then I could point out some other things that I like as well. But the Cavaliers at the Chicago Bulls over 236.5.
I love this. This was actually on my radar as well. I think I'm going to join you. Is this a pace spot? Is this you think it's moving this direction? What is the walkthrough on this over here?
Both. Bulls play with the fastest pace in the league. We know the Cleveland offense has been incredibly efficient and great with their shot selection under Kenny Atkinson. We also know that the Bulls just played against the Atlanta Hawks, another high scoring pace team. And we saw the line open at 236.5, 237, depending on the book, and close at 241.5. So despite this being a high total, this still clearly has room to go based on what's been happening in the market for these relative teams very recently. Even against the Mavericks, when the Mavericks and Bulls played, Mavericks are a fantastic defensive team. The line reached 238. So seeing a 236.5, knowing the Cavaliers probably more of an offensive team than the Mavericks are, knowing that the Hawks game went all the way up to 241.5. This is a market direction, pace spot, and just a bunch of basketball metrics that say the over is the correct play.
I love it. My best bet. So my side is going to be the Kings -1.5. So they are playing in San Antonio. They are on a back-to-back, and the Spurs are not. However, I have this around Kings -3. To me, this Spurs team right now is a team that can beat the bad teams, even though you mentioned they lost to Jazz. It was a very close game, and they've beat most of the bad teams they played. They've also lost to most of the good teams they've played. They do have a nice win in there, but the Kings are the exact opposite. They are the team that can, or in a way, they're the same. They also beat the bad teams or the teams that are worse than them, and they lose to teams that are better than them. So I think these are two teams that are very comfortable with what they are this year. I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises. It is in San Antonio. Wemby has played a little bit better of late. They do have Devin Vassell back. But to me, this Kings team is a notably better team. And like I said, I have this more at like Kings -3. It's not a massive edge. But I do like the Sacramento team going into San Antonio on Monday. Do you have any leans on that or any directionality of where you think that line might end up, Fiddle?
No, I just know that the Kings and Suns are in a close one right now, and the Kings are just being depleted in the second half. So maybe they come out. That's actually probably good for your ticket tomorrow if you want them to come out after a loss in like a revenge spot where they dropped one where they should have won, and then they get the lowly Spurs. It's probably a strong spot to pick up the Kings.
Hopefully no overtime or anything like that.
Exactly.
My 2-player props, I'm going to the Spurs side, ironically, and looking at Devin Vassell points. So he had his debut on Saturday, and he looked great. And he looked very important, too. So his minutes were a little bit limited. He scored 21 points, and the spacing was just so big. So Jeremy Sohan, again, I don't know why we're doing this still. He's now out, so there's going to be minutes for Vassell. I'm not sure exactly where this prop will come out. His game one was 12.5. He cleared that very easily. I think it might jump up to 14.5 or 15.5. I would be comfortable with it at those spots. I'm not going to play it over, 17.5, something like that, if they really overreact to it. But I think he's going to get minutes. He got his shot up. He clearly was not rusty and like not feeling confident to shoot. He was getting his shots up. I think he's very, very essential to this Spurs offense. And then we get a Kings defense that, they play fast. They don't play the greatest defense in the world. So anytime you've got players going against them, I'm at least a little bit intrigued. And kind of to that point, we have Alperen Şengün. I'm going to look at his over PRA. He had a little heart-to-heart with Udoka a couple games back. Seems like that has kind of woken him up. He's had 2 of his better games recently. He's got the Washington Wizards now. They are absolutely atrocious on defense. They play at a fast pace. They're really, really atrocious on defense at the rim. They're allowing teams to shoot 78% from 0 to 3 feet. Per Basketball Reference. That is by far the worst in the NBA. So I'm intrigued by a couple players on the Rockets tomorrow. And again, we don't have these player props out exactly, so my apologies for that. But keep an eye in the app, and likely an Alperen Şengün over. Phil, do you have any final thoughts on the Monday slate, or should we get out of here?
I think that'll do it.
All right, excellent. Well, I mentioned the app, the Action Network app, the award-winning Action Network app. Make sure you're following me and Fiddle there. Make sure you're following me and Fiddle on Twitter as well. Is it Fiddle's Pick or Fiddle Picks? I always forget where the S is.
Fiddle's Picks, just like Fiddle's Sticks. Like
yeah, it's very good. I do
genuinely quite Fiddle's like that. Picks.
Fiddle's Picks on Twitter. I am Turvey Bets on Twitter. Make sure you check this out on YouTube. Make sure you like and review, all of that good stuff. Mostly, though, this was a good episode of Buckets. I think we faked out at the beginning and told Matt Moore. We gave him his little nod. We miss you, Matt. We will see you soon. And for now, let's get buckets.